There we go. Welcome everybody. Hope the microphone is working well. I tested it before I went on, and my ears weren't blowing out of my skull. So, give me a thumbs up if it's working. Welcome to Houston with a Problem. Yeah. I haven't really had a chance to skim through all the pre-chat here. So let's look. Interesting topics. Fed wants $715 billion back in reverse repo by June 25th. That's a lot. That's adding what, $200 billion in the next 2 weeks? That's crazy. Or $150 billion. That's a lot. That's a lot. That's a lot of money being dumped into the market when the market's supposedly like going gangbusters. So, yeah. Okay, thumbs up. Mike's working well. Fantastic. Thank you. Looks like I got a couple of people I've modded in here. Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so yeah, both Citadel and BlackRock have millions of puts and junk bonds, junk bond HYG for this Friday. Yeah, from what I read, it's $4 billion in puts they bought. That if the price of HYG drops $10, they stand to make $200 billion off of it. So it's quite the bet. It's got a huge payoff. I bought some. I have some $86 for that, just in case, make tens of thousands of dollars if I can. If that thing actually drops by Friday, who knows? Yeah, I might get some for the following Friday too, because they're like pennies, and it's higher odds than the actual lotto. Yeah. Okay. Let's see what other questions people got. Oh, we got super chat from Dr. Stonk. Is HYG going in the toilet? I bought 50 puts, tempted the YOLO. That's exactly what I did, man. That's why not? Because if the market as a whole takes a dive, then the HYG stock, which just seems to just go at $87 and never move beyond that. The only time it takes a huge drop is when the market coughs it up, and it dropped from $87 to $69 in like a week's time. So if you've got puts in that, you're making like 10 grand off of 10 of those things. So you'd be like 50 grand. So not such a bad way to go. Okay. And thank you, Dr. Stonk. Thank you so much. All right, let's find some more questions. I've got about until 5:30 tonight, so I can go for about an hour and a half. And I actually remembered to get myself water this time because, duh. All right, so my voice can hopefully last. Okay. Oh, from Citadel. Thoughts on AMC's gamma squeezing this week with so many calls coming up in the money? Yeah, that they've got I think this week 40 million shares went in the money off those calls, and they've got over, I don't know the exact numbers. If someone has the numbers, I think it might be like 100 million shares might go in the money at the current level for this Friday, and that could trigger a huge gamma, which will then cause the price to go higher, which causes even more calls to go in, which causes more gamma, which hopefully rockets us. And if, in fact, the short sellers are out of ETFs to short, they might not have anything in the ammo box to keep the price down much, other than naked selling, which is what they love to do anyway. So, yeah, I think there's going to be significant gamma, not just for AMC, but for everyone this week. The buying pressure, I think, is going to go up, and it's one of those weeks where people just smell blood in the water. A couple weeks ago, when we saw that huge spike to $72 for AMC, everyone the week before was like, "What's happening? It's going to go on $50 or higher," and it did. So much of the market is dependent upon, what everyone's thinking at the time. So that's that's kind of how it works. Yeah. Dr. Stonk, where is our GME crypto dividend? Someone tweeted me earlier saying that it was July 14th, not June 14th, when it's supposed to go live. So maybe we're waiting for then. I was really hoping for this week, but I think it's happening. It'd be really interesting to see how they piece it together. Like, are they going to generate wallets themselves and then give those wallets to the brokerages to give to us, or are they going to have us create wallets that they can send to us. I'm not sure exactly how it's going to get divvied out, but it's going to be really fascinating to see exactly what they do and exactly what the short hedge funds response will be to the fact they can't counterfeit the dividend. Yeah, it's going to be, like I said, interviews I did, like the money I put into these stocks is purely entertainment at this point, because I'm really curious to see how it's all going to unfold. So much stuff is in the works, and if these margin calls happen and the price on the blue chips and indexes and everything else, crypto just plummets, what does that do? How do we bounce back from that? Especially when like the buy pressure for stocks comes so much from hedge funds in themselves. So if the hedge funds are all getting margin called, they're not buying anything, and we'll be the ones with the money. So how? I guess we're just trading our cash for these stocks. I'm really curious to see. And BlackRock's spending all their money on houses, and if the banks lose all their liquidity and there was a huge credit crunch because of all these margin calls, where does the buying pressure for homes come from if they can't issue loans? So it's going to be such a weird thing that I'm just can't wait to see it unfold. That is more like morbid curiosity. Okay, Rostock. I told King Griffin I'm going to fly past the moon and ride my big red rocket straight into Uranus. Awesome. Powell Guitars, thank you so much. I love it. I love it. I love Uranus jokes. I always tell my students if they can tell me a Uranus joke I haven't heard yet, they'll get an extra point in their test. Love them all. Why was the Star Trek Enterprise flying around the toilet? It was checking checking your anus for Klingons. Okay. Seabound 117, in some ways, it's easier to do this. Sorry, that's not really a question. I need a question. Seabound, do they even have to hide, like with AMC? Aren't they just using either options market or OTC counter to stealth cover while delaying orders to prevent price fluctuation? Very possible. The thing about what's being traded on OTC and in the dark pools is I don't think they're legit shares. I think it's synthetics that are going back and forth. And so all they can do is kind of, the mobsters come, the enforcer comes to break your knees because you haven't paid them. And you're saying, the check's in the mail or whatever. I think that's pretty much what they're doing. So it's not really a way of covering, but it is a way to kind of stave off collection. Because we own the shares. We have the physical shares that they need, and not enough of those things are on the OTC or in these dark pools, because the dark pools are only institutions. And with AMC, institutions only own 15% of the float. So there's no way for them to actually cover with the dark pools and these off-exchange markets. So it's a delay tactic. Eventually they have to offer up money to buy our shares. And that's kind of where we are at the moment. Okay. Let's see here. When the fines violations are just worked into operational expenditures, are they actually consequences? No. That's from Seabound 117. If the consequence of delaying orders on like $1 trillion in retail trades is a $700,000 fine, then that's just an expenditure. That's a write-off at that point. The SEC has a huge problem with not fining these institutions and funds at a reasonable rate. If you or I did what they did, we would be bankrupted by fines from the SEC. But these fines are a drop in the bucket for them. They fart $700,000 at lunch. So it's not at all a fine. What it needs to be is, hey, you delay orders, your chief executive is going to prison and you're paying $1 billion or something. That's what it needs to be. So it needs to be something that's much more heinous, and we need to hold white collar criminals to serious standards where they don't go off to 3 months at Club Fed. They go to 20 years at pound me in the ass federal prison. So it's I think there needs to be some fear put into the bros at these funds so that this stuff isn't just blown off, that they can't just manipulate the market this way. And that's like a superpower. They have a superpower that is, they can delay our orders, they can trade off market, they can generate synthetic shares, none of which we can do. And we're at a complete disadvantage, and it needs to be a fair playing field. And we need to set the system up so that it is, so that there's not these special benefits that billionaires can use to absolutely just ravage us. And I hope that the SEC, when this comeuppance happens and this big giant market correction that we're going to get, that they actually do something about it. Rostock, how many planets in our solar system? There are 8 planets in our solar system. Pluto is not a planet, and I will stand behind that. I totally agree with the findings. To be a planet solar system, you must be in the plane of the sun's rotation. So the sun rotates, and like a frisbee spinning, all the planets rotate on the same plane. Pluto was found by accident. It just happened to be crossing through the plane of the galaxy, but actually it orbits at like a 20% angle. And to also be a planet, it must be somewhat similar to a circular orbit. I mean, they're all elliptical to a bit, but it has to also clear out the path of its orbit. Pluto does not. Pluto crosses Neptune's orbit. It's considered a Kuiper Belt object, and Kuiper Belt objects are usually planetoids or defunct moons that got thrown out of orbit by something else, and they orbit at weird angles. We got some that orbit completely perpendicular to the rest of the solar system, and they're all tiny. So 8 planets in our solar system. There's lots of Kuiper Belt objects, Sedna and Xerxes and Xena, and I can't remember all their names, but there's lots of them out there. Okay, thank you for the question. I will gladly talk about planets and rocks all day long. Okay. What did I have for dinner with my mother? That's from Resident Flea. My mom, once she retired, she's like, I am never cooking again. So when I have dinner with my mom, it is a wonderful bought meal from somewhere else. Hey, she earned it. She doesn't have to cook if she doesn't want to. So, my stepmom's the great cook. She seems to love cooking. So I'm actually headed there for dinner tonight because I hate cooking myself. Rostock, 7 after I destroy your anus. That's a new one. You get a point on your midterm. Good job. I can't say this. Mupulin. What price at this point will trigger instant margin calls? GME last week almost hit 350. That's twice now where GME brushed that 350 line and then just got shorted into oblivion. I think that there's some magic number behind that. With Melvin back in January, it was every $11 GameStop went up, they lost $1 billion. So we can, just divide it 350 by $11. We can see how many billions of dollars Melvin's out right now, just based on their January positions. Not any of the short selling that they've done since, which probably compounded that. I wouldn't doubt if it's more than that now. What is 350 divided by 11 is going to be like 30 billion, something similar close to that. 350 divided by... Yeah, so like $30 billion that Melvin's probably out at this point. They're not even worth $30 billion. So if it pushes that high, I think that might be a magic number for margin calls in some of these hedge funds, which will probably cascade from there. So yeah, good question. Yes, fine security violation should be 110% the profit. That's from CBound 117. I totally agree. It should be significant and painful. I mean, the clearinghouse, if you have a failure to deliver on a non-fast product, meaning a stock that's not traded electronically, and you have to deliver like the actual physical certificates, I think it's 130% fine just from the clearinghouse. So why shouldn't there be similar fines for failure to delivers for electronically traded stocks. Louis Aquilina. Houston, what's your opinion on them shorting ETF when GameStop is on its way out? Yeah, that's exactly. It seems really desperate. Very desperate. ETFs are such a pain in the ass to short because especially ETF like the Russell 2000, GameStop's 1/1000th of it. So to short one share of GameStop, you have to short 1,000 shares of the Russell 2000. And then the Russell 2000 is going to take all those shares out and put them into the Russell 1000. And they need those physical shares to do that. They can't necessarily break apart these synthetics like that. So to short the entire Russell 2000 by like 400% or whatever it was they did in about 48 hours is a serious act of desperation. So I think it's a last gasp effort, especially in 2 weeks when it rebalances. All right. I think my roommate just cranked his rap music. Hopefully it's not coming through on the microphone here. Smooth Gotti Beats. Can you explain HYG bonds for GME and will affect the rest of us next week? HYG is a junk bond ETF. So they've got a whole bunch of fingers in these junk bonds, and it's a pretty stable investment normally that will stay fairly steady. I mean, it's basically been at $87 for years now, except for one huge drop March of last year when the market took a tank. And what it looks like is that, Citadel and BlackRock usually don't invest in the same things, but it appears that the two of them have put $4 billion into puts on HYG, betting that it's going to drop this Friday. And if it drops $10 this Friday, it's $200 billion in winnings for them on those puts. So it's a really interesting... For a big fund to invest $4 billion in something that could just evaporate is kind of a big deal. And that's why a lot of people are paying attention to it. That was a big find for them to discover that. So, I for $1, you can buy like an $82 put. And if it drops to $70, you just made, $1,000. So it's a pretty good deal. What's the likelihood they drive AMC below $40 this week? I don't think there's much of a likelihood. I hate to make that prediction, but I think we're going to see Gamma happen this week because there's so many puts and calls that have been purchased. So many calls, I should say, that are due on Friday. I think we're going to see some Gamma as a result because the price is so much higher than when those contracts were issued that there's going to be a lot of drive by the option houses to purchase shares, and that's going to put a lot of buying pressure on it. So, yeah, that's what I think. Chris Horn, thank you so much. Okay, let's scroll through, find some more. I got it. My terrible eyes are trying to look for question marks. Ever read Breakfast of Champions? Heck yeah, I love Kurt Vonnegut. I wrote an article. It must have been like 2002 about U.S. policy in North Korea and kind of how messed up it was. Because back then, North Korea had an agreement with the United States and the International Atomic Agency that we'd have inspectors at their nuclear sites to guarantee they weren't making bombs. And for some reason, the George Bush administration pulled all the inspectors out and then gave North Korea like $40 million. And so I wrote an article about how weird that was and why I couldn't understand why they would do that. And Kurt Vonnegut sent me an email thanking me for my article. And it's like the highlight of my life that Kurt Vonnegut sent me an email. I need to find the old account and print it out and frame it and blow it up in my living room or something. Yes, for Breakfast of Champions. Pal Guitars. Can you go through the scenario if the hedges go bankrupt? Any chance we don't get money during the MOAS? No, they have to clear the books. So if the hedge funds get margin called, the brokerage is obligated to sell off enough assets to cover their obligations. So let's say there's 10 million shares of GameStop they have to buy. So the brokerage sells off the assets of the hedge fund. The hedge fund's got no ability to stop them from doing it. Brokerage sells off the assets until those 10 million shares are purchased. And if those 10 million shares cost $100 billion and the hedge fund's only worth $20 billion, the hedge fund gets liquidated out of existence, and then the bank who lent to the margin of the hedge fund is now responsible. And the bank has to start paying. They have to pay until those shares are purchased and the position is covered. And if the bank runs out of money, well, they've got no option. They're done. They're liquidated, and likely the Federal Reserve has to step in and bail the banks out, because the banks need to have money so there's liquidity, because we need that money passing through the economy for consumer goods, for homes, for credit cards, for all that, for cars. So they will likely see money there, and the clearinghouse is now responsible with their, whatever insurance policy they have. So their buying computers start going, and it's likely that they'll run out of cash too. So the clearinghouse will likely have to be bailed out as well, because the clearinghouses are what the entire U.S. market is based upon, and if they don't have any liquidity, then the economy's over. So I think the Federal Reserve is going to play a huge role in making sure that these positions are closed out and that the banks don't evaporate and the clearinghouse isn't bankrupted. So that's where I see it going. The Federal Reserve's having some emergency meeting this week, and I wouldn't doubt if they'll be discussing these things and action plans as a result. Mr. Joe Nada. How do I see the MOAS playing out? Best case scenario, hierarchy of hedge funds collapsing around 10K and the insurance computer stepping in. I think the hedge funds will probably collapse at a lower price than that. The hedge funds might start collapsing when GME gets to $500 and they start getting margin called, because the buying pressure is going to be insane. So it's going to take off from there and go higher. I think it's hedge funds, banks, DTCC, Federal Reserve. I think that's the order. It might be hedge funds, DTCC, banks, but I think the banks come before the DTCC on that role, because the banks are members of the DTCC, and they're the ones that are responsible for the margins of the hedge funds that trade under them. When Archegos went under, it was the banks that were responsible for paying that. So that's why Credit Suisse and Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan and Nomura all lost billions on that, because they lent to Archegos way too much. Archegos was like 50-1 leveraged, which is not sustainable for anybody. Okay. Yeah, emergency Fed meetings on Tuesday. So I wouldn't doubt if they're going to be discussing that stuff. Okay. Scroll to another one. Cuba just told American tourists not to bring dollars. They will not take them anymore. That's from Get Real. I mean, Cuba usually likes to have that hard currency, but I'm not sure. Are there many remission payments to people back in Cuba from people who fled into like Florida and stuff? I don't know. I don't know about the stats on that. But I mean, we saw El Salvador adopt Bitcoin as an official currency, because it's really easy for remittance payments from El Salvadorian immigrants and migrants to send money back to El Salvador that way. It's interesting. I mean, if it costs $0 to send money to a country in remittance using these digital currencies, then it might be really appealing, especially if you're going to wire it, it might cost 10% of what you made. So that's very possible. Okay. Oh, I think I just got to where I started the just scrolled too far ahead. Okay. The scrolling action on the YouTube thing is absolutely gnarly. It wants to, like, I do one scroll and I can follow along, all of a sudden it just zips me right back down to the bottom again. Okay. Squid 619. Pluto is not a planet, bud. It is a Kuiper Belt object. It is a planetoid. That was Ibaru. Okay. Oh, Donna Holder. Thank you so much. Hiya. Mupulin again. What price do you think AMC will trigger margin calls? So let's do a little math here. All right. So if AMC's triggered or shorted 50%, which is way below what we think it is, that's 250 million shares. So 250 million, and right now it's at $50. So right now it's 12.5 billion that the short hedge funds will be out if they buy at market price right now to cover, right? For those 250 million shares, which we think is probably significantly more than that. All right, if it's $100, that's 25 billion they have to cover. If it's $500, we're at 125 billion, and there are no hedge funds in existence that can cover that. They're done. And so anywhere between, if the market cap for AMC all of a sudden is over $100 billion, everyone knows something's gone seriously wrong, because a company that can sell $1 billion in movie tickets should not be worth $100 billion. And those who have lent to these groups on margin, I think if you get that high as a total market cap, then you're screwed. You have to margin call, because it's just going to get worse from there. How big will the squeeze be? 100x, 500x, 20,000x? This is from Gilly. I think some people will see, if they bought in May of last year at $2 and they're able to sell for millions, then, they're at a million X. So it could be pretty big, I think. From where it is now, I wouldn't doubt if we see several thousand times the price that at the absolute peak for those few shares that are able to sell in that peak zone. So I think it'll be pretty big. Donna Holder, hey Houston, do your students ever watch your videos? I don't know. An old student of mine from the Art Institute named Ian, he popped up in my videos once. That was pretty cool. Yeah, I taught him math at the Art Institute. I think I also taught him geology as well. Maybe it was astronomy. Ian, if you happen to be on, you remember which one it was. He took them all from me. I don't know. But yeah, so I've had students pop in before. It's been fantastic. It's really cool to see them. Johan Skinars, thoughts on the Artemis program? Are you involved? Would love podcast on the subject. Love the one about public health care. I'm not involved in the Artemis program, although doing a show on that would be pretty cool. I should check that up on the list. I think going forward for my shows is if I'm home and I can spend time doing the research, I'm not doing field work, which at the moment the truck is destroyed, so field work is going to have to get delayed, which might mean a really terrible fall and when it's cold for me to do some of the contracted work I have. I'm going to try and do a written half-hour long recorded podcast each week, and then do one or two of these kind of question and answer shows. So the written shows I think are going to be on all sorts of different topics, kind of things that interest me and I think people might be interested in, not necessarily financially focused. So doing something on the Artemis program would be pretty interesting, or on space mining, or on resource extraction, or on school funding, or whatever. Those different topics, and in those recorded episodes is where I'm going to put the clues for my treasure hunt, which will be launched next week. Editing the video right now for the Stoke video for the treasure hunt, and so you'll get a new clue every week in one of the recorded podcast videos, and hopefully someone will find my treasure. So yeah, let's do one on the Artemis program. Awesome. Okay. This is for Protege Son. Houston, what, if any, metrics will you be looking at to see if the squeeze will be winding down? Yeah. I think when the price starts to get beyond anything that a regular retail investor could feasibly afford, I think we start looking at just pure volume. And if the volume, if like say for GameStop in a few day period, the volume's at 500 million shares, it's probably on the wind down after that. If only 100 million shares have been covered in those 5 days, it's probably still going on, because the synthetics that are out there that have been bouncing back and forth in the OTC and in the dark pools, all those things have to be covered too. So it'll probably take a while. So that's probably I'm looking at. I also think that we'll see days where the buying pressure will just vanish, and that's just because everyone's out of cash for the day, waiting for the next level of the redundancy takeover, or the Federal Reserve to release more cash or something. That's my guess. So we'll probably see peak, plateau, drop, as far as the buying pressure is concerned, as it moves from one level to the next. And it'll probably take a while. So gauging where exactly that super peak is, some people might just get lucky and hit it, and others may miss it entirely and try to sell on the way down. But by then, the books are cleared and the buying pressure is gone, and they might not get it. So we'll see. Mike Harrod, this whole thing comes down and you don't have to go back to work. Are you going to become a full-time gold prospector? Yeah, I'd love to be like a hobby prospector and just look for. It's fun to go out and like mellotech and smash rocks and acid test things and play with a dredge and do all that stuff. So I'd love to find like mineral lodes all over. Except that gemstones are more my bag now, though gold is still fun. Cameron Mirza. If the fail to deliver as an AMC happens this week, will any cash be left for GME? Probably. Because there should be. I think the FTDs for GME are next week, the 24th, right? So the week after this coming week, 24th is when that 21 day FTD cycle starts to happen for them. So it might be an AMC week this week with all those calls that possibly go in the money, and then next week we see GME pop even more. But for the most part, their graphs really follow each other. It seems like that the hedge funds have really made the same plays on all these meme stocks, and so they really seem to just follow each other. Okay. So this is Chawboy Merc FTD 21 day this Monday. I think you're talking about AMC. I think that's AMC's 21 days this Monday, and then the following Monday is GME's next big 21 day cycle. WM asking, do I think the quad witching day will boost? Yeah, I think the 18th. I think we're gonna see some awesome stuff by yeah. I think we'll see a good big punch. JL, got a Vonnegut punch for your Atlas Shrug. Oh, another Vonnegut story I have is years ago I randomly saw in the paper that like Al Franken was doing a book reading of his book, Oh, the Things I Could Tell You. And so a friend and I, after class, I was still in college, we went to the book signing, but I didn't have any money. I'm a poor college student. And so I couldn't buy his book and have him sign it. So I get in line and he's like, what do you want me to sign? And I had a copy of Cat's Cradle by Kurt Vonnegut. And so Al Franken opened it and signed it for Kurt Vonnegut and handed it back to me. So I've got a signed copy of Kurt Vonnegut's Cat's Cradle forged by Al Franken. So I'm the only one in the world with that, probably. Nostalgia T, what does we own the float actually mean? Do we need to buy all of our shares? Likely to at least need to buy enough of them so that when institutions get a pile, they can start selling that. So there's the amount of shares that are out there in total for how many shares the company has issued, right? And the insiders, the people that are on the board, the C-level executives, people like that, they have shares, but they can't sell them easily. In order for them to sell shares, they have to notify the public like 30 days ahead of time or something that they're going to sell shares, and so that's to curtail insider trading. So if a member of a board sees that, oh shit, we're about to lose $1 trillion next quarter, I'm going to dump everything I own, they can't do that and dump all their stock before the public's made aware of what the bad news is coming. And vice versa, if they see something awesome on the horizon, like, oh, we're going to get a huge government contract, they can't secretly buy a whole bunch of shares and then, that contract gets landed. So if they're going to do any dealings with that stock, either buying or selling, they have to notify the public ahead of time. So that's set aside. Those are restricted shares. And then there's the float, which is the publicly traded shares. And with GameStop, depending on the data, there's stuff in April saying it's 25 million. There's stuff saying it's 50 million. If it's 50 million, then there's 50 million shares that can be traded on the market. But about half of those shares, 25 million, are owned by long investment funds, your mutual funds, ETFs, things like that don't necessarily trade on a daily basis, that stock. So there's the float, and then there's the actual like traded float, which might be even half that for GameStop. So it might be at 25 million shares that can trade. Well, when we say we own the float, that means that a lot of those shares that institutions hold that are long-term investments, they get lent out to short hedge funds and then sold. So your USAA mutual fund or your ETF that has, or Vanguard fund or whatever, that will have pieces of these shares in them, they get lent out so they can be short sold by hedge funds, and we buy them. So we own that, and they have synthetics. Well, some of us trade on margin, and in those accounts, the brokerage will borrow our shares and lend them to a short hedge fund to sell, and then we buy them. So we might have a whole bunch of synthetics and a whole bunch of legit shares in our accounts, and all those shares have to be purchased to be able to pay back the lending that has happened on the float. So when they say we own the entire float, it means we probably have all the physical shares in our account plus a bunch of synthetics, and then there's a pile of synthetics inside the accounts of these long-term investment firms. So when the first glut of shares gets sold, a lot of those shares will be taken to replace the synthetics in various accounts. And if a lot of them are used to replace synthetics in mutual funds or big investment institutions like BlackRock or whatever, then all of a sudden BlackRock may have 1 million shares that they can sell. And they can sell they can dump those 1 million shares in the market, and who knows if they're diamond handing, because they've got 1 million shares that they can sell them for a pile of money. They might just do it because a lot of money is a lot of money. So we have to kind of see exactly how the float works out once those big institutions start to get their hands on some legit shares they can sell. Michael Turner, why do the charts of GME and AMC match each other so closely? Is it because they're shorting ETFs that contain both? Probably. My guess is that a lot of these shorted stocks, the meme stocks, the same play was made at the same time by the same hedge funds. So they saw, all right, brick and mortar's dying, movie theaters are dying, everything's moving online. So, no one uses BlackBerries anymore, whatever. So let's short the stuff into oblivion because we can drive it to zero, especially during the pandemic. And it's golden. We'll make a pile of money. And the retail investors flipped the coin where they said, we're not going to panic sell when we see this price drop. We're just going to buy more. And so all of these meme stocks that get talked about a lot, they're now stuck in the same playbook with the same hedge funds. So you'll see AMC do something. You'll see GME do the exact same thing. You'll see Cost do the exact same thing. You'll see Bed Bath & Beyond do the exact same thing. You'll see BlackBerry do the exact same thing. And they just follow each other because there's not enough people and not enough creativity at these hedge funds to, I think, experiment to see how to shake people out. If I were at Citadel, I would try to run an experiment on one of these other shorted stocks and see if something else works rather than just, okay, we're going to naked short a whole bunch, maybe I'll shake them free. Oh, that crap, that didn't work. They bought up all of our stocks and now it's right back where it was. Okay, we're going to naked short a whole bunch of ETFs. Well, naked short a whole bunch of ETFs. Oh, crap, that didn't work. So what are we going to do next? Oh, no, we're just going to naked short shares again. And they're just doing the same thing over and over and over again because they don't have enough people on staff to independently operate every single solitary stock that they shorted to oblivion. So I think they just enter in an algorithm into one computer that kind of does the same thing for all of them, and that's why they mirror each other so closely. If Citadel had 100,000 employees, all 10 of them working on each different stock they shorted, that'd be one thing. But they've got a few floors of a high rise, and they don't have enough people to actually do that. Donna Holder, will the impending gamma actually be Friday, or can it be any time during the week in anticipation? Yes. If the 21-day failure to delivers for AMC is this Monday, then we're going to see a squeeze or a gamma from that. And as the price gets higher, these option houses that sold naked options at what they thought were obscene levels months ago for 618, they're going to have to enter the market and start buying up shares. So we might see that 21-day FTD combine with a gamma squeeze from the option houses that will push the stock quite high during the week. And we'll probably see short attacks from the hedge funds. My guess is Wednesday and Friday. We'll see short attacks. But this week, the short hedge funds really did shot their load on Thursday, put everything on SSR. So they were forced to short ETFs on Friday because you can't short regular stocks when you're on SSR. So their only option was those ETFs, but I don't think they have anymore. I think they're tapped out. Beats by Jay. What's going on with HYG? In the AMC link, I was just looking at open interest on puts expiring this Friday, and the volume is insane. Yeah, I talked about that a little bit. HYG is linked to when the market crashes because it's a ETF full of junk bonds. And when the market takes a hit, the likelihood of being able to pay off junk bonds takes a hit. And so the speculation on that ETF just crashes really hard. So there's a ton of betting being done that this Friday, the market as a whole will take a big nosedive. They put a lot of money into that. And if it does, they stand to make hundreds of billions of dollars on those puts. So that's kind of where we are. So if margin calls get triggered and blue chips drop for some reason, then the people who have got puts in HYG will make a fortune. And why everyone chose the 18th, all those big funds, I'm not sure. They might know something we don't. They're the market makers. They make the market, so they might be onto something. I don't know. I figured it was worth a few dollars to bet along with them, so I bought some of those puts. I need a sip of water. My voice is going hard today. It's a lot of pollen out there. Euphorium morning, or youth morning. Could you anticipate outcry of the lies being spread? I would imagine that if an increasing crowd sentiment against FUD could cause regulators further problems as more folk see through their lies. There's a lot of attacking that seems to go on. I get tagged and stuff on Reddit all the time where I'm being called a fudster or a shill, and my stalkers made an entire subreddit devoted to me. And I don't know, man, like, the squeeze is going to happen. How it happens, none of us know. We can all try to do our little mental experiments and try to crunch numbers, but humans are predictable in some ways and not predictable in others. And when people start to see lots of zeros in their accounts that they've never had before, their instinctual reactions may counter any pre-planning they had ahead of time, and who knows how it's going to unroll. We can try to predict the squeeze. I think the squeeze is going to happen, but how it unfolds, might not necessarily happen in the exact ways we predicted. And I don't know. So a lot of people will yell FUD at things because it's not the exact way they predict it's going to happen. And I don't know. I do think from the number of trolls that hop into these chats now, I think that I've at least gotten on someone's radar that they want to come in and try to disrupt things. But I think the guys, everyone I've deputized as moderators, you've been a giant help. Thank you so much. It's cheaper to pay someone to go on the internet and type up a bunch of stuff and bother people than it is to cover several $1 billion in obligations you have. So they will do that every single time if they can use those shills and those naysayer accounts to bother people and shake them loose of their investments. But everyone sees through it. It's such an obvious play. It seems like a waste of everyone's time at this point. Okay. Scroll. Oh, some real questions popped up here. This is MRAM 1999999222222233311. Is there any way those hedge funds trading 60% of the AMC volume in the dark pools are able to cover the dark pool? Will it hit the real market? I don't think so. I think most of what's being traded in the dark pool are synthetics, and you can't cover when a margin call happens. You can't cover a synthetic with a synthetic. At most, what you can do is you can buy that synthetic and delete it from existence, but you can't use that synthetic to pay off another synthetic in that margin call situation. So I don't think there's a way to cover in the dark pool at all, because there's 500 million shares in existence and retail owns 500 million shares. So how are you going to cover with a bunch of synthetics being traded on the dark pool? I don't think it can happen, man. That's the way I see it. I got asked that question by somebody on Twitter earlier too, and yeah, I think they use the dark pool to mask their positions, which if Rule 2 and Rule 5 go into effect, I don't think they can do that anymore. So I wouldn't doubt that lady that was on Fast Money on CNBC yesterday. She kind of addressed this a little bit, saying that the dark pools in OTC are being used in ways they were never intended, and the fact that you and I as retail traders don't have access to these resources is really unfair, and I think the SEC has to address that, especially with as much wealth of retail investors as been put in the market in the last year. They can't have us losing all of our fortunes to the shenanigans by these hedge funds, because it's not sustainable for the U.S. economy. So yeah, Michael Turner. How many of the 60 and below options expiring this Friday do you think have already been hedged for? Oh, I don't know. I think a lot of these options are the hedging by these short hedge funds. I wouldn't doubt that Citadel and others have purchased huge amounts of these and trying to push the buck past the buck onto the options houses. A lot of these were set up months ago, years ago for 618. So 2 years ago, an option house selling a $60 option on AMC at a penny was just free money for them. Like, yeah, I'll sell millions of those, make a few $100,000, we're good to go. And never in a million years did that option house think that when we got to 618.21 that the stock could be trading for $60. The option house is like, well, I'll get this free money. I'll never have to buy the shares to actually cover this call, so I'm good to go. And there's a lot of people, option houses, that are panicking because they sold millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of these options that they don't have shares for. So and the hedge funds sold millions and millions and millions and millions of options that are millions and millions of stock that they never actually held. They sold them naked. So an easy way for them to cover that obligation is to pass all all their problems onto the option houses. So I think that might be what they're doing. And oh shoot, somebody's one vanish. Was it Xanderix. Oh, thank you, Xanderix. You didn't have a question. Phew. Here's vanished from the top there. Thank you. Brandon Becker. Oh, thank you. Much love. Found you through Jackson Hunter. You're a great teacher. Enjoy your content. Jackson Hunter is such a sweetheart. I was supposed to go hang out with him in LA this week, but my truck broke and I'm here. I'm back home. So I didn't actually make it to LA to go say hi. I hope I'll be able to make another trip down there at some point this summer on one of my adventures, but I need an engine in the war rig first. So maybe we'll get there. All right. This is Eddie Carlin. What's your take on FINRA currently have GME short interest at 11.97 million? The way FINRA calculates short interest is through legit shorting of stocks, like stocks that are borrowed and sold. That doesn't represent actual short interest because the market makers can naked short all they want, and the option guys sell tons of naked options. So if you look at the institutional investment on FINRA, you go to the FINRA website for GME, there'll be a little bar at the top that talks about insiders and other things. Then you click shareholders. You scroll down, it will show institutions and funds that own. And the institutions and funds that claim to own 5% or more of GME, they own 150 million shares, and there's only 73 million shares in existence. So obviously the short interest must be more than 100% for that to happen, especially since it's like 300% the float. So that tells me how many naked shares have been generated, sold, and bought. S3 Ehor last September changed the way S3 calculated short interest. Prior to that, short interest on GME was like 130%, and then they redid their calculation and it was like 25%. This is because S3 only counts the shorting of a stock once. So if you are an institution, you lend a share out, that share gets sold, that's one time, and the short interest is X number of percent based on those shares. But if it's lent out, sold, and the person who buys it lends out the share, S3 deletes the original calculation, the original synthetic from their calculation, only counts the new one, even though there's two synthetics that are out there for that one share. So it's a weird way. I don't understand why they changed it. Yeah, that's what I see. Do the HYG puts have anything to do with inflation on the repo market? I don't know. The repo market is usually made up of hedge funds that need cash. They've got in their assets, they have government bonds, and those government bonds are stable. They will make you money, and they're like kind of like gold. They just won't change in value very much. So if the hedge fund needs cash, they go, "Hey bank, I need cash." The bank says, "All right, give me your collateral of those bonds." So they lend the bank the bonds. The bank then gives cash to the hedge fund, and these loans are short term. They might be a day or a week or a month. And once the hedge fund does whatever they need with that cash and make their money, they have to essentially buy their bonds back. And that's how the regular repo market works. I'm not sure how that would tie in with HYG, because HYG is junk bonds. These are like corporate debt. And it's not just corporate debt, it's corporate debt that's not the best. It's like A- or B rated bonds. So I'm not sure how that would tie into the repo market, because usually those bonds don't get to be used in repos. The banks like it when the collateral is government bonds. I think the term they use, if the collateral isn't government bonds and it's stocks or corporate bonds or other securities, they start to refer to as toxic assets, because they're not as solid a rock. I'm going to have to look into it more to see if HYG plays with the bond market. I think HYG is pretty much more of a predictor that the general market as a whole is going to go in the toilet. That's how I see it anyway. Well, I don't know. I'm sure we'll find out this Friday whether that happens or not. So, get out the lounge chair and drink and enjoy it. See what happens. This is really the first time in history where we the retail investor might be on the side that wins when the market takes a dive. So, man, that's like, yeah, that's where we are. Nicholas Leflim. My thoughts on sorry, my eyeball's trying to read this. Appreciate your insight. Question. My friend thinks GME will still squeeze higher than AMC. Thoughts? Can AMC GME squeeze at the same time? Yes, I think they will squeeze this. I think all of those meme stocks will chain reaction and squeeze at the same time. That's what happened in January. Was they all skyrocket at the same time when GME was hitting $480, cost was hitting $127, and AMC hit 26 or something. That was its previous peak. I do think GME will squeeze higher simply because there's fewer shares available, and that's the entire reason I think will squeeze higher. What AMC has going for it is that there's a smaller percentage of institutional ownership of their shares, so the retail might have a little more ability to withhold selling and drive the price higher. But there's just, there's 10 times the shares out there for AMC as there is GME. So it's a supply and demand thing, the way I see it. Dan Boss, I have an eye on an island near Nassau. Yeah, go hang out in the Bahamas, man. I'd love to. I'll join you. Yeah, a Protege son, if Citadel's bet on HYG pans out for them, could that be their hedge against margin call? Yeah, if they make $100 billion off of that bet, that's a lot of cash in their hand all of a sudden that they can use to cover or to at least avoid margin calls. But if it doesn't pan out, then they just lost $4 billion or $2 billion, however much of their share they spent on those. Looking for question marks. Johnny Diamond Hands, if that's the case, why is Ehor and S3 giving GME and AMC claw of 100 at 100 squeeze factory? I think because they know the actual truth. I think that's why. Ehor gave an interview to CNBC back during the baby squeeze, and he specifically had said that the short hedge funds have like 270 million shares they've got to buy of GME, and that was 6 months ago. Despite all of the naked shorts and naked call options that have gone in the money since then, which might be 5-10 times that. So some of the people at S3, at Interactive Brokers, at Fidelity, they've got access to computers and data that we will never see and that they can't reveal to us because of NDAs and whatnot. And they know what's going on. They can see the writing on the wall. So I think these guys, I think they know. I think despite the numbers they give us, they know the truth. And yeah, that's the way I see it. Okay. SM, is 10,000 AMC or 100,000 AMC not just a meme? And if so, will anyone be allowed to sell at that price? Wouldn't that bankrupt most brokers? The brokerages, I don't think necessarily go bankrupt because the brokerages are the ones that are going to be liquidating the assets of banks and hedge funds when the margin calls happen. I think they're just kind of like the middleman, just like selling stuff to get cash to buy our shares. The brokers that may have a big problem are the ones that trade themselves on margin, and they may have to turn off their high frequency trading during the squeeze, or because they won't be able to cover. If they rely on the delay between you buying a stock at $100 and them waiting to find it a penny cheaper so they can keep the difference, they can't do that during a squeeze because I want to buy a stock at $100 and they have to go out and try to find it for $99.99 and all of a sudden it's $110 during that delay. Then they'll sit there and go, and then they are responsible for failure delivers and they're going to be losing money in every trade. So I hope they learn their lesson from January and are able to turn off the high frequency trading and not delay the orders and hoping to find it cheaper, because the squeeze won't be every second you wait, the price will be higher. That's the only way I see the brokers going bankrupt in this is if you have got those those little retail guys like Robinhood and Webull and whatnot that do people's trades that way. Okay. Can market makers sell shares back if not enough people exercise? I don't know. I assume that you're talking about options that sit there. If they don't exercise them, what happens is if they expire in the money, they get automatically exercised. So that's what happens. So if you can't avoid not exercising if it expires in the money at that strike price, that it has to be exercised regardless. But one of the ways they do get exercised is rather than you paying for those shares, they might just give you the cash for the difference, and it works that way. So that's probably what a lot of them are doing, is just paying the difference on the value of the share. Are holders that bought months ago, as from Andrew Stewart, are holders that bought months ago likely to have real shares rather than synthetic? It depends on how you bought the shares. If you purchased them with cash account and not on margin, the likelihood is higher that you have a legit share. And the way that naked shares are divvied out, from my understanding, is, let's say Citadel or one of the hedge funds that have market maker status, they sell 1 million shares they don't have. They sell them naked. They have 3 days to try and find a legit share to make good on that. And if on the third day they don't, the brokerage that does their trades for them is obligated to find within their clientele those 1 million shares. And what the brokerage does is they assign synthetics into those accounts where those 1 million shares are. And those synthetics are IOUs from Citadel or whoever the market maker was that sold naked. The brokerage takes those 1 million shares out and they give those legit shares to whoever purchased the stock. So now the naked seller, the market maker, is responsible for the IOUs in the brokerage's accounts. If it happens and the person who sold naked wasn't a market maker, at 21 days, the brokerage is assigned to liquidate whoever sold those naked shares and to put legit shares into the accounts of all their clients that they had to borrow from. The weird thing is that a market maker can get to the 21-day threshold, they can get to the 35-day threshold, they can go on forever, and there's no mechanism that forces them to actually replace those nakeds that they made. And that's one of the big issues that we're facing right now, is that the market makers can generate as many naked shares as they want, and there's nothing there to force them to actually make good on it. And what the market makers seem to do is they buy deep in the money calls and puts that are due, 2 years from now, and they tell the clearinghouse and the brokerage, like, oh, I'm good for it. Under Regulation Show, all I have to do is point out where the shares could be, and they can sit there naked forever. And the new rules, which were supposed to go into effect tomorrow, which got pulled from the SEC website, said you can't cover that way. You have to actually exercise those puts and calls. So if that happens, then all of a sudden the market makers can no longer have this kind of loophole that avoids ever actually making good on their deal. If I sold you a car and never actually gave you the car, I go to prison for fraud, right? So there needs to be a mechanism in place to keep this fraud from being legal, and I'm hoping that these rules get passed and the SEC and the clearinghouses actually do something about it. That's where we are. Rules are only as good as their enforcement. Okay. Oh, I just did that thing where I accidentally scrolled too far all of a sudden. Sorry. Got to readjust my thing here. The one thing I'm doing for myself when the squeeze happens, I'm getting my eyes lasered, so I don't have to rely on glasses anymore, and I want to be able to see like an eagle. So that's the pat on back I'm giving myself, is laser eyes. All right. Jay Rutherford, reverse repo is a giant disaster. It seems like. Yeah, I think you're right. So the repo market is when the hedge funds need cash. They give their government bonds to banks to get cash for short-term lending. Reverse repo is when the Fed's buying bonds and the banks need cash. So the banks say, hey, hedge fund, let me borrow those bonds from you and I'll give you cash. So there's basically a negative interest rate all of a sudden on these government bonds. And the banks take the bonds and they sell them to the Fed and they get a pile of cash. And the banks are betting that at a later date, the interest rates will go up and they'll be able to buy those bonds cheaper somewhere else and then repay their loan to the hedge funds. Well, what seems to be happening is that the Fed is buying up hundreds of billions of these bonds and the Treasury Department isn't issuing any new bonds. So there's going to be a shortage of bonds available on the market, and the banks might get short squeezed on bonds while the hedge funds are short squeezed on the meme stocks, and that's just a recipe for disaster. So yes, Jay Rutherford, I think the repo is a giant disaster on the reverse repo is a giant disaster on the horizon here. Got that whole perfect storm. I mean, it's Sebastian Junger to write the book for us. Gilly, you got me wrong. I said in addition to AMC, some stocks have squeeze potential. Oh, yes. Quite a few. I think we're going to see a lot of stocks. I think we'll see the regular stocks that we know of pop, and I think there's a chance we'll see a whole bunch of ones we never heard of pop that we didn't know have been shorted to oblivion. That might be where that Ryan Cohen tweet about Sears came from, because Sears got shorted to oblivion. What they did to Sears was textbook evil. You had a company, Sears Kmart. They had billions in sales every year. They own most of them own the land that they sat on, and so they had hundreds of millions, billions of dollars in real estate assets, and the short hedge funds saw them as ripe for the taking. So what they did is they shorted them to oblivion, and then they bought a bunch of their shares and held on to them and got their people put on the board at Sears Kmart to purposely just destroy the company from within. So one of the first things that they did was they sold off all the land that Sears and Kmart owned and then signed really expensive deals to lease the land back for their stores. So now they're just hemorrhaging cash every month. And the money they made off of selling that land, they gave to the C-level execs and the board as bonuses. And so that money was never put into reserves, whatever went to shareholders, it went to the heads. And once you start to destabilize the financial future of a company by getting rid of their hard assets that they can borrow against, all of a sudden their credit rating drops. If their credit rating drops, interest rates shoot up whenever they need to do something else. And they start to hemorrhage cash. And as they hemorrhage cash, service goes down, quality goes down. It's a long-term company, so there's all these pensions that they're responsible for. And if they can't start paying the pensions, they face penalties, and they start to get eaten from within. And so then, the creditors come in like, okay, you need to cut costs. We need you to close these stores that are underperforming. We need to sell off these brands. So all of a sudden, they're selling off their name brands like Kenmore and Craftsman and other things. And now they have no assets. Now they're just a crappy retailer selling things that they barely own, and they're no longer vertically integrated. They don't own the warehouses, they don't own the stores, they don't own the logistics infrastructure, they don't own the factories, they don't own the repair guys, and before long their stock's worth 25 cents. They declare bankruptcy and they're being traded on the pink sheets, and the short hedge funds just made billions. Woohoo! And that's what they were trying to do with GME and AMC and all these other companies. Was you'll see the short hedge funds put a toxic individual or two into a C-level executive position or under the board, and they will undermine the entire company on behalf of the short hedge funds to drive the price down. And GameStop especially was lucky in that Ryan Cohen saw the opposite, and he went in there and did battle against anyone who may have been part of the short hedge funds for GME and got him out. So it's really hard for the hedge funds to torch a company at that point. I may have gone off a bit of a tangent there, but that's how it works. In the old days, the vulture capitalists like Bain Capital and whatnot, they would buy a company, and they would kind of do it the same way. They would, like when Bain Capital bought KB Toy Hobby. KB Toy Hobby was a company that made $4 billion a year and was in every mall in America. Bain Capital bought them, over leveraged their assets beyond belief. They over leveraged it to billions of dollars in loans, gave themselves the billions of dollars, and then declared bankruptcy on the company and walked away. And then the creditors all of a sudden had to deal with everything there, and that's how KB Toy Hobby went out of business. When I was at the Art Institute was originally in Pittsburgh, and then they made a branch in Seattle, so there were two of them, and it was kind of like the Harvard of art schools back then. And what they did was they went public because, you got a successful company, make a couple more branches or whatever, you go public. They went public. In the end, Goldman Sachs bought a majority stake in the Art Institutes. And Goldman Sachs vulture capitalized it. The Art Institutes owned all the buildings they were in, the various cities they were in. So they were huge landowners in these urban areas. And at my school, there was a building that was 3 blocks long, 7 stories tall. It was like 1 million square feet. And the Art Institute had 3 floors. And then the rest of it was rented out to Real Networks, to Zulily, to a couple other startups. And they made, $7 million a year in rent off of this building. The absolute bottom of the market, the vice president of the Art Institutes sold the building for $15 million. It's a $100 million building. He sold it for $15 million in 2012 and then rented back the 3 floors that we taught in for $600,000 a year. Now they're making $7 million a year off the building, and now they're losing $600,000, and the vice president retired with a $15 million bonus, never to be seen again. So, all of a sudden the schools were losing money like crazy, and the response to losing money like crazy is, let's cut classes. Well, that doesn't make any sense, because if you cut classes, you aren't making an income. Your entire income is based upon selling classes to people. And so they cut a bunch of classes, and then they lose a bunch of money because people aren't paying for classes, so they cut some more. And then the student population goes down, and then they went into bankruptcy, and they just walked away. Goldman Sachs walked away. They're like, see ya, we're done. And then evangelical company bought the Art Institutes and stole all the students' money, and then they went into bankruptcy. So these vulture capital guys, they're evil. These short hedge funds, they're evil. They destroy perfectly working businesses that provide a service, and they just obliterate them. And they make a lot of money in the process in a very short period of time by destroying the goodwill of these companies. Yeah. All right. Yeah, Toys R Us. This is Desfina Maggiore. Toys R Us, the same thing. Toys R Us, their sales were the same prior to the vulture capitalists taking over as they were after the vulture capitalists take over. They just had no assets, and the vulture capitalists over leveraged them to oblivion. So yeah, the Toys R Us thing was absolutely evil as well. Okay. And it happens to a lot of companies too. They do it everywhere. So the two sides, you got the vulture capital guys and you got the short hedge funds. They basically destroy a company and make money off of it no matter what. Yeah, Bradley Gillup. So much for fiduciary responsibility. Exactly. Okay. Code Sounds Gaming. How do I feel about David Ings works at Citadel and on the board of the DTCC? It makes sense. The DTCC is like a country club for financial institutions. So they've got brokerages, hedge funds, market makers, banks that are all members of this organization, and the subsidiaries, the OCC, the DTC, the NSCC, all these little subsidiaries of the DTCC. So you're going to pick your board members for the DTC from your membership. So there is there is going to be a conflict of interest in there. The problem is that Citadel is actively hurting the DTCC. with their shenanigans. So, I mean, it's the same thing if Citadel is shorting someone to oblivion. They're going to try and find a way to put one of their people on the board of a company they're shorting. So you want people on the inside to do your bidding for you. Citadel's a member of the organization, so it's very likely they can get somebody on the board there. Whether he has the DTCC's best interests in mind and not Citadel's, that's where the question lies. And judging from Citadel's actions in the past, I don't think they do. I think I think that they're on there for Citadel's gain, not for the memberships, the other members of the DTCC. Okay. Mupulin, what's your opinion on Adam Aaron saying we own 80% of the float, 120 average? Do you believe him? Yeah, I do. I think it's going to be even more than that because they weren't able to really accurately count foreign investment, and foreign investment traditionally is 40% of the U.S. market. So, there could be another couple 100 million shares owned by foreign investors that couldn't vote because of the way that the dynamics are set up. So yeah, I think he's saying that there is a load of short synthetic shares out there, like wink wink, and then they made sure to mention they had a hard time counting foreign investors, so that there's even more out there. So yeah, I believe him on that. I think his metrics and the way he worded it was a good way of wording it, of kind of like giving that nudge to the short hedge funds, like, hey man, we're on to you. What effect do you expect the 450,000 $40 calls expiring on 6/18 will have on the stock price and the squeeze? I think it's from Cami Hunter. I think we're going to see a gamma from that. That's 45 million shares that have to be in the hands of these option houses to make good on these calls that will expire in the money. So they've got to go out and find more of those shares so they can make good on their orders, and that's going to drive the price up. It's going to give us a gamma squeeze, which will cause even more options to go in the money, which make them have to go out and buy even more, and we're just going to see that sucker drive up. The way that gets fought, Cami, is that the market makers, like Citadel, is they start to naked sell to the hedge funds. So Citadel buys a whole bunch of options they know are naked. And when the gamma squeeze happens, they make a bunch of money selling naked shares to the option houses, who then have to give those shares back to the market makers. So they win off of it each time. It's a stupid system, and I hate it, and I want it to stop. But I think the gamma is good for us, and ultimately. So let's see that price rocket. It's from Nick. What do I teach? I've taught everything. When I was at the Art Institute, I was originally hired to teach math. So I taught all levels of math, from basically these are what numbers are through Calculus 1. And then I started teaching astronomy. I started teaching geology. I taught environmental science, biology, evolution, chemistry of food, physics of motion, physics of sound, intro to logic. I think that's all I taught at the Art Institute. And now I teach at a film school here in Seattle. I teach kind of math and science for film majors. And then I teach for Edmonds College. I do physics and astronomy for them. So that's what I teach. I'd love to teach geology again too, because geology is really fun to get everybody out in the wild. Okay. Oh, shoot. Sorry, the scroll just... Cole Peters. Not sure if it was already covered, but look at the puts for SPY, QQQ, HYG, Apple, Facebook, July 16th. It's insane. All right. We know about HYG. It'll be interesting to see like SPY and QQQ. So Apple and Facebook, they're breaking. Apple and Facebook will drop. That's a good chance, because those are blue chips that if there's liquidation of these hedge funds, they're going to be hurt as well. So it's probably good to have puts in those guys. Yeah, I think the institutes are betting against the entire market. I think they know that there's a correction coming, because I mean, just look at corporate debt in general. Prior to the pandemic, corporate debt was at levels that were completely unsustainable. 109% of all corporate profits in the United States went into stock buybacks, which means every company was essentially borrowing to buy back their stock to artificially inflate the price, which is why we saw such a steady climb for the last few years in the Dow and Nasdaq and New York Stock Exchanges. Is that these companies were reducing their float artificially to keep the stock price high, because as long as the stock price was high, the C-level executives got rewarded with their bonuses, and all of that was done on borrowing. And if you are borrowing money to buy back stocks, you're not using money in corporate profits on R&D and infrastructure improvement and dividends for your shareholders, and that's not sustainable. That type of stuff ultimately hurts a company's longevity in the end. So they can see their stock crash plummet, their bonds go unpaid, and we can just see a catastrophic fall from that. Add to that the fact that trading on margin has skyrocketed by like 100% in the last year, but the stock market hasn't grown by 100%, means that a whole bunch of people are over leveraged on their margin trading, a whole bunch of institutions and everyone else. And, then we've got the reverse repo market happening. I think that there's a whole bunch of negatives happening that are going to bite everybody in the butt. So kind of hedging your bets and betting against the market as a whole might be kind of wise right now. Not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. It's what I'm doing. I'm betting there's going to be some pain. Thomas H. Is Webull going to be safe to store money in? Will the banks safe to send our cash out to? I think I touched on this the last live show. Try not to have more than $500,000 cash in your brokerage accounts. If you ever have that much cash in there, buy something. Buy some sort of security investment and put that money into that. So at least you have a piece of paper that has some sort of value. If you have more than $500,000 in there, anything above $500,000 is not insured. So that's why I have multiple brokerage accounts, because if this thing takes off and I've got a lot of cash, all of a sudden I can easily spread that money out to several different brokerage accounts that all have a $500,000 insurance level. Your bank account is insured to $250,000. So it's good to, if you've got more than $250,000 to your name in cash, to have multiple bank accounts too, so that they're all insured. And if a bank goes belly up, your assets don't go with it. So yeah, Webull is insured to $500,000 for cash, so you should be good for that. But I still think it's wise to put your money into stocks and bonds and everything else rather than hold it in cash in that case. Because they trade kind of similar way that Robinhood does. And if they didn't fix their algorithm for the squeeze, they may run into margin trouble as well. And we saw that under certain brokerages, that like Interactive Brokers and Robinhood, that if you trade on a margin and they're getting margin called, they'll liquidate your assets for you without even telling you. So, yeah, switch your accounts to cash and get rid of the margin, and you stand a little better chance of not losing everything. Some people are talking about Lou. That guy really creeps me out. I didn't really know who he was, and people sent me a couple of his videos, and I don't know, man. I don't know what his deal is, but I got weird vibes. Okay. Den Boss, shenanigans is almost as much of an understatement as the Fed saying they have monetary policy issues. Yeah, you're right. Proje's son, how do dark pools and off-market trades affect on the market share prices? Side note, Vonnegut made artwork for a Fish album that was never used. Really? Interesting. The dark pools are a way of reducing buy pressure on the market. If the hedge funds and the options guys have to go into the regular market and buy up these stocks, then that creates buy pressure that affects the price retail people play. If they trade these things back and forth to each other on the dark pool, then we never see that buy pressure, and they can invent whatever price they want off the market. And that's one of the things I hope changes as a result of the comeuppance that is happening. Yeah. So, did I miss an Eric Nelson super chat? Sorry. Let me scroll up and find that. Pull in. Sorry. Sometimes you get talking and then the super chat vanishes from my view. Eric Nelson. Oh no, I think I did talk about that, didn't I? If we get over 400,000 calls by 618, do you think cause gamma squeeze? Yeah, I think I got that one, didn't I? I may have just gotten to it late. Okay. This time also Robinhood restrictions on sell and buying. This is from Sudeep G. Robinhood's been really cryptic. The problem was during the baby squeeze was Robinhood stopped letting retail buy and only let them sell. And that reduces buying pressure, which keeps the price from going upwards. And people keep asking Robinhood if they're going to restrict their ability to trade. And Robinhood keeps answering, we won't affect your ability to sell. That's not the question, Robinhood. They're asking if you're going to affect their ability to buy, not sell. And so Robinhood's been a little suspect with the way they dodge that question a whole bunch. This is from SM. That's going to be $50 million just for mentoring Lou. He keeps threatening to sue people. Oh, all right. Well, Lou can sue me. If you've ever read anything from my stalker, I get sued, man. I don't give a shit. It happens. People like to sue. Okay. Let me scroll back down here. What's going to happen to crude oil, uranium, lithium, etc. post squeeze? This is from Andrew Stewart. Man, raw materials will be interesting because raw materials are mostly traded like U.S. dollars kind of standard for a lot of those raw materials. Most of the places they come from are developing nations, and they want hard currency, so they want euros or dollars, yen, Japanese yuan. What will happen with those? Well, if we see a lot of inflation from the Fed having to bail out all the banks due to this, comeuppance that will be happening, we could see a lot of inflation, which means the value of the dollar will drop and the price of oil will go up. It also might be a way for the international powers to get the oil off of the U.S. dollar. It might not be the standard anymore if we see too much inflation. So if the U.S. dollar isn't the standard for oil, it might not be the standard for other things as a result. I don't know, man. We might see prices of certain things skyrocket and other things, if there's a credit crunch, absolutely collapse. In 2009, when there was a credit crunch, oil prices bottomed out. I mean, it was like $10 a barrel in March of 2009, and I was paying $1 for a gallon of gas all of a sudden. So how it all plays out, I'm not sure. I wish I was really good at like financial billiards so I could see what ball hits what and bounces into what pocket and where the stuff goes. But I honestly can't predict if we'll see like hyperinflation and the price of oil skyrocket, or if we'll see a credit crunch and the price of oil collapse. I don't know, man. That's a good question, and I'm sure we'll get the answer. Derek P. Yeah, my stalker's everywhere. He's like omnipresent, man. He spends all day every day just thinking about me and probably beating off in his van. So, what can I say? I've got some cool shirts. Oh shit! It's 5:30. I've got to get going. I've got to go enjoy a wonderful home cooked meal by my stepmom. Thank you so much, everybody. That was a lot of fun. I love chatting this way, and it's great. I miss talking to people. So thank you so much. Have a good night. I'm hoping to have a written show hopefully by Tuesday and launch the treasure hunt by Wednesday, depending on if we get everything edited. My roommate, who's a film guy, he's editing it all, and he's much better at these things than I am. So look forward to the treasure hunt. It's coming. Yeah. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great night, and I love you all. All right, I'm ending. Bye-bye.